But by the way, everyone, I do want to establish this and just say it. Nicholas, apologize, but I do want to say this. I have respect for Snake, ladies and gentlemen. Me and Snake had a little bit of a rough start, I think, at the beginning in terms of some of our comments. But you know what? I think we've kind of cleared the air a little bit. And I do want to let everyone in my channel know this, that Snake does have Smokey's respect. And I would like to move forward with positive, interesting, profitable engagements with him in the near future. So I just want to establish that. I do think Snake is actually looking for truth. We have a lot of atheists out there that don't care, and they just want to find ways to validate what they already know and what they already think. I don't actually think Snake is one of those people.
So for me, maximally intelligent wouldn't really be an arguable point because we could almost define it to have to be there. But then the arguable point is if concepts of religious and moral purpose have any abstract correlation with fundamental purpose. If we're to say fundamental purpose is the definition I've used in this argument.
I guess where I'm have an issue, I guess I'll just try another analogy. Like, if we're saying so I would agree the most maximally purposeful human exists, for example. And then we go and say, well, potentially the most maximally purposeful human would be the Superman. Like, can fly, is indestructible, has laser beam eyes, and has an unshakable sense of justice. And then you're saying, so therefore the Superman exists because the most maximally purposeful human exists. But we have no idea whether
I
actually.
use that as an argument.
Sorry?
I was going to say, I guess I could use that as an argument for Messiah, where we're arguing whether or not Messiah actually existed. I can just back out of the historical argument entirely and use this one.
But do you see the flaw there? Is because we don't. I assume
like
that you agree.
So
I assume that you agree
with
that
that
the
example,
Superman doesn't exist.
Well, that's the Son of God, Messiah. So I mean, you're expecting different characteristics because you're defining purpose differently. So if we get to the most fundamental purpose, we have spiritual purpose.
But so as
that's
long
where
as
I get to this quote: "God is a spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth." So we can intuitively know that fundamental purpose prioritizes spiritual and moral purpose above physical increase, as if physical increase were purpose.
So you're saying if we can find some more maximally purposeful being than Superman, then we can know that it exists? Just because it's more powerful or more purposeful? Like, is the most
I really
maximally
on Messiah is the thing, because I'm like this argument for me sort of does seem to work for Messiah. Like we could expect, then one could argue like, well, then why not including other animals and stuff? But then the scriptures have all these answers. So like as sharing my culture and everything, yeah, as we dig deeper and deeper into this question of Yehovah, we have thousands of answers within our scriptures.
Well, I guess I'm trying to point out, how do we know the most maximally purposeful thing that we can imagine from the most maximally purposeful thing that actually exists? Like, we know that there is a maximally tall human, and I can imagine a 50-foot tall human, so that would be more maximally tall than the tallest human that we know of today. But that doesn't mean that a 50-foot human exists. In reality, it's, I don't know, what is he, like 9 feet tall?
Oh, maybe the definition of maximal I'm using is different because these maximals are the greatest potential, or so not the greatest realized potential, but it's just the greatest potential. And then that's sort of the whole point of the argument, is that I'm saying that the one of most potential is the same one that's realized. Just say it in sort of layman terms, maybe.
Because I mean, I'm with you in imagining that this could be the most maximal thing that we can imagine of. But is it
Yeah,
the
we're
most maximal
hypothesizing
thing
so that,
that is actual?
yeah, and then my argument there is that whichever one, if there was more maximal possible, then that ends up being this one. So that's
Just
where
so if I can imagine a more maximal being than this definition of Jehovah, then that automatically exists
let me
in
see, the
reality.
likelihood of the existence of maximal purpose is maximally likely. So I think we're hooked on this step here, where I say it's maximally likely that maximal purpose exists.
I think where I'm seeing a gap is I think you've defined Jehovah as some maximal purpose that is maximally intelligent, maximally intuitive, transcendent, maximally factual, etc., etc. All those things you labeled, but I'm not seeing where you actually showed that that possible maximal purpose is in fact the maximal purpose that is actually existing.
In fact, I had just mentioned in chat, I actually thought you were making a pretty valid point, Snake, just in terms of your presupposition, the argument based upon a presuppositional level, looking at it and saying the basis of the argument, the presupposition, does need its own kind of logical basis. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, it seems like he's saying that Jehovah is the maximal purpose.
Right.
And then
And then he just
I would
builds off
agree.
that, and you're kind of looking for the presupposition for that, or you're looking for the argument for the presupposition, kind of, right?
Yeah, because I would agree
Okay.
that there has to be some kind of maximal purpose under this definition, and
Okay.
that this concept might be conceptually a maximal purpose over other concepts, but I'm not seeing where he's arguing that this concept actually exists as that maximal.
And I think I'm actually on the same page with you there. So I
Okay.
hope he comes back and we can get a little more clarity, because I actually think you're very logically valid on that.
Cool.
So yeah, no, we could almost probably have our own conversation at some point, Snake, on how we probably both think that the presuppositional apologetics world is just kind of a bit of a dumpster fire right now. you know, we might we might be able to find some common threads in that.
Yeah, we can definitely bond over that because
Okay, good. Well, look, maybe we'll get together and do a little Darth Dawkins roast or something.
oh yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, we'll look forward to that.
And then
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you bridge
Yeah.
the gap between the hypothetical and the actual.
the actual is what the hypothetical, I'm claiming that this hypothetical, or that this case is the best objective case to go forth with based on what we witness in the actual. So the actual is already here. And then I'm using that to make this case
So you're saying it's the
that somewhere out in the actual there is a maximal of harmony and purpose, is the case I'm making, and that my people have called that harmony and purpose Yehovah, which is the source of itself and everything else.
Are you saying that the Jehovah is the best explanation of the hypothetical explanations?
Yeah, I'm saying Yehovah is the best explanation of what we do witness.
Just because it's hypothetically more purposeful?
Yeah, I guess that does have a lot to do with it. Based on this definition of Yehovah, is there a strong case here or not?
I think I'm with you up until your conclusion in number 11, whereas like I actually accept that there is this fundamental, I don't know, some people call it the first cause, or the maximal harmony and purpose, which I would call the maximal degrees of freedom, or potential for degrees of freedom. I think some atheists might not accept that, but like in my debate with Darth Dawkins, I was like, yep, there is a first cause. There is something that's fundamental, that is underlying all of existence. So I'm with you up until the point where you're saying it seems like you're just leaping to, okay, now that source is this hypothetical Jehovah. And so I'm still not seeing a connection between that definition of Jehovah and the actuality of it.
Okay, so I guess I sort of went out on a limb when I threw in all these other factors that describe further into the spiritual understanding that we have received down from the elders. And so if I had stuck with just the harmony and purpose part of it, then it sounds like, based on how I made my definitions, you find the argument pretty agreeable up to there.
Well, if you wanted to label the source Jehovah, I could maybe agree to that, but then I would have to I would have to question, these other traits that you listed. Like, is that Jehovah, is that source intelligent at all, let alone maximally intelligent, and et cetera, et cetera.
And so what do you think of that? Why do you...
Did you have any points for that, like later on, or did we reach the end?
No, I don't have any more points about Jehovah. I have a brief list of how I would argue about Messiah.
Gentlemen, may I possibly maybe pose a question from the audience? Because it is still on the topic where we were just at before you move forward, as opposed to saving it to the end. Do you guys mind? It is for Nick from Johans. He says, if I imagined a maximally great dragon, does that imply that it exists?
If it's maximally likely to exist, then you would be on the same track. But when you go with the category of dragon, then the question is whether Jehovah allows the dragon to exist or not. And when we're at the most fundamental point, we no longer have something to just go above to trump. So then that's why the greatest maximal argument has some weight if you're talking about maximal potential to exist of all existing things.
Okay, well, beautiful. Proceed, gentlemen.
Couldn't you say that the maximal likelihood of some things is zero? Like the maximal likelihood that there's an elephant in my room right now is zero.
Yeah. So then, is the maximal likelihood of this source of existence that I proposed zero? I mean,
well, it seems like we don't know. I think, like, a hard atheist would say, yeah, there's zero. And I think the more attributes you assign to it, like, I would say it's closer to zero the more you assign, like if you start going into the Messiah, I would have more objections. But at this point, I'm just like, we just don't have any information. Like, we have this hypothetical. Now what? Like he said, if I imagine a maximally great dragon, does that mean that the dragon exists because it's maximally great? I can imagine a maximally great purpose. Does it mean that that's the maximally great possible purpose, I guess is what I'm saying? Or is it just an idea that we have Is it just like
Yeah,
the
my
the
argument.
maximally tall human as defined as the 50-foot human versus the actually existing maximally tall human?
Yeah, my argument's that if it's the maximum, um, the maximum possible power to exist, then that does exist because if whatever exists, if it's less than that maximum potential to exist, then that maximum potential to exist has to also exist.
Well, I can agree to that, but how do we know that that maximal potential to exist also has the traits of intelligence?
Oh yes, that I would appeal to the discretion of the judge. So each person would judge whether they agree about maximal intelligence, maximal intuition, transcendent. So that would mean it has all the advantages towards purpose that come with being sentient, as well as all the advantages that abstract facts can have. Is how I'm using that word transcendent here. Maximally factual. I think that one's a little bit hard to argue against. Abstractly disembodied. That gives it no limits for its maximalness. So I think that's a good trait. It's beyond mental. Um, yeah, that's a little hard to pin down, but I think intuitively that would be a pretty safe assumption. Beyond physical, that's along the lines of abstract disembodied. Beyond personal, so it's personal, but it's also far more than personal, far more than experienceable. And then fact of fact is what it is. So
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah,
would
those are
just
all a matter of
focus.
individuals to judge for themselves. Yeah.
I mean, I would just focus on the trait of intelligence first and foremost, or even awareness. Um,
Okay, so where do you
but
think
if,
that that would not? Can we focus
well,
on how that relates to purpose? How if it increases the maximal harmony and maximal purpose or not? Since that's how it's framed into the argument. Because it seems like
sure.
whatever level of harmony and purpose you're getting without intelligence, it seems intuitively fair to presume that with intelligence you can take it to another level.
Um, yeah, but I'm not sure what you mean by someone can judge for themselves whether that exists. Like, do you have like a syllogistic reason why that intelligence must exist in the maximally actual purpose? Like, I would
No, this is where
agree.
I
I might agree if it has intelligence, then it might have a greater purpose. But we don't know if it does have intelligence at this point.
Gentlemen, and
well,
if I may, just real quick, then I think again we have another question from the audience that I think maybe is right along these lines here, and it is for Snake. Snake, this is from Jungle Jargon, and he's asking, what is Snake's position on what it is that is the cause of everything?
Um, as far as I can tell, I think it's. I mean, it's not complete. I don't claim to have all the answers, but there's something about non existence that is incoherent, and therefore something exists. So it's something like that.
Okay, very good. Please proceed, gentlemen.
okay. And that I find pretty agreeable. That sounds like a very intuitive way to describe a lot of what I was getting at here with words. And this is something I discovered intuitively originally. And I worded it in a completely different way a couple weeks ago. Then I think this is actually more to the point of why I decided that maximum purpose is the most likely source of existence. And then from there, that really made it extremely reasonable to have confidence in the direction of God instead of being a faith against reason. It was a faith supported by reason in that circumstance. But it was something I came to trying to see what I could work with from skepticism. So I guess that would sort of be my question, is if this maximal potential to exist being what correlates with existing, that you are more powerful by definition, you are more powerful to exist, so you exist rather than that which is less powerful to exist. This sort of line of thinking, if there's a skeptical perspective from which I should not come to this conclusion, is sort of the question I would ask of my opponent. Aside from maybe arguing the detail of intelligence or a couple points that I'm not claiming I can prove, is there some other direction that objectivity should take us in? What are your thoughts?
Well, for me, the intelligence would be kind of the most important part there, because we agree that there has to be some kind of source for all this. And then if you could show that it was intelligent, then that would kind of tip me on the scale towards your side. But you said you couldn't prove it, right?
Yeah, I appealed to intuitions. We have intuitions. We base our philosophical foundations on intuitions. We experience experiences intuitively. The foundation of I think, therefore I am is to grant an intuition as self-evident fact. And so at that point, I'm appealing to intuition that we're getting a greater potential of purpose and harmony from something that has some form of intelligent arrangement, so has some form of intelligence guiding the and then I would say you get the maximum of those advantages from the maximal intelligence, and then it sounds a lot more impressive than some form of intelligence did. So I do think intelligence is a fair one, but I don't want to just keep belaboring the point. I do have to confess that that's the point where it gets into spirit and truth, intuition, and the fundamentals that underlie the argument that it has to stand on. It can't just be up its own, pulling on its own bootstraps. So therefore, that is, that's one of the points where the rubber hits the road, I guess I could say.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about
maybe
the bootstrapping problem a little bit if you wanted, because it's hard to say if I have an intuition either way, because I really try hard to suspend a lot of these judgments, or intuitive judgments, especially with these kind of questions. But the bootstrapping problem where, God needs to exist in order to create existence itself, that's kind of a problem for me. But what, or like, so if a purpose is the source of existence, then a purpose would have had to exist before existence exists. And so that all becomes very confusing, and that is kind of labeled one of the bootstrapping problems. And that's why I kind of lean away from it. But what would you say to someone whose intuition is that they're intuiting that there is no God?
Well, in terms of this argument, I would be asking where they object to the argument, or if it's specifically at this moment of connecting this maximal source to a God idea, or puts the name Jehovah on it. And I think what you were just addressing about the bootstrap problem is where a lot of this stuff comes in, of being disembodied, being beyond mental, beyond physical, beyond personal. You have transcendent. So yeah, these are addressing that observation that there's a bootstrapping problem, which I think increases, since we know the bootstrapping problem does exist, it increases the likelihood that it's fair to attempt to describe characteristics which address that, because the source of existence, which must exist, must somehow cope with the bootstrapping problem. In essence of when I say coping, I mean its fact of existence must cohere with that somehow, because both things do exist.
How could you explain how that kind of solves the bootstrapping problem?
Well, it means that what I'm proposing, since what I'm proposing has a bootstrapping problem and reality has a bootstrapping problem, that would mean that what I'm proposing coheres with reality, which is in favor of what I'm proposing, not against what I'm proposing.
It kind of seems like begging the question, because you're
Coheres.
saying like it's true, therefore it's not a problem. But
Oh yeah, then
I don't know how we get to know that these traits, proposed traits of Jehovah, are in fact real traits that exist in the source.
yeah, so we are now circling back to where I admit that that's up to your own intuition. If your intuition is that maximal super intelligence is not going to increase the thrust of power to exist, if it's not going to increase that likelihood, then you can find this point disagreeable. I personally think it strengthens my argument to say it's maximally intelligent, because that fits with what would be in this maximal position. So if you think that that perhaps weakens the argument, I think we just disagree there, and we do so on intuitive grounds.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just
As far as I can
intuition, I
tell.
can't really do anything with that, because I would need like a logical reason, because I don't, like, I know that there are people who are going to intuit that there is a God. There are people who are going to intuit that there are no gods. There are people who might intuit that there are many gods, or some
Well,
different
we're
form
getting a
of
little carried
God,
away with
or
intuition, in that I said intuition on this intelligence detail. And so, and that does
okay.
apply to some other details, but I think when we start saying intuition to my whole argument, that's not really what my whole argument did. A
Well,
lot of
perhaps, I
my
mean,
argument, started from some things exist, for example.
perhaps someone intuits that this is some sort of a god, but that it's a blind idiot god who's just spitting out existence, but it doesn't really know what's going on. It's just a beast of some kind, almost.
Oh yeah, and I don't think that it's as reasonable to think that such a source of existence would occupy the prime role for which I have established in this argument. And so that prime role, I think, fits better with maximally intelligent. So while I can't directly say here is a logical proof against that, I can just cite that I think it's less reasonable. And I don't know why you think the opposite would be the more reasonable, or if
Well,
you
if
know,
it's
whether this is a matter of how reasonable it is or a matter of hard proof.
if it's just up to intuition, is there really a reason behind any of the conclusions? It's just kind of a gut feeling, right?
Well, we have intuition that we think there, I think therefore I am is grounded in an intuition. So when I say intuition, I don't mean that it's a matter of reflexes or instinct or something. I mean that it's not a logical proof, but it comes from a point of a direct observation, whether a direct observation of mind, a direct experience. So we experience that there is harmony and purpose that comes forth from minds. So I'm appealing to one's experience of that rather than finding a way to argue that, which I don't know if I can argue in any kind of proof sort of sense.
There's nothing established here, so why would we expect these things to be established? Or then you would think I should just remove them because they're not established. So this really is, I think, just a matter of disagreement. All I can think is that my case is stronger with those words maximally intelligent in there. Like, if I try to say it's not the maximally intelligent one, someone will be like, well, I agree with you with all those except I add maximal intelligence, and then their argument becomes better than mine. And so it just makes the argument better. So I'm still, even though there's this issue you're having that I haven't like logically proven it, I'm not trying to say I've proven maximally intelligent. I guess I'm using it as a presupposition that maximal intelligence would increase maximal purpose and maximal harmony. And I think it's a good presupposition, and using it, I think, strengthens my argument. So I guess that's where I have to go with that. As far as the way you're dissecting it, I'd have to say it's a presupposition, but because I use it, my argument is stronger. Like, knowing that the argument uses that presupposition, the person who hears it, they know that the presupposition's true, so they're like, oh, look, it's using a true presupposition. This is a strong argument. So that's why it says maximally intelligent. And I'd like to hear your response, but we may end up agreeing to disagree. I don't know.
Well, it's like, can you say that for any other maximal quality that you're trying to prove? Like, pick any analogy for anything. I'll just stick with the penguin on the moon thing, whereas being on the moon would increase the maximal height of that penguin, but that doesn't mean that therefore it exists.
Penguins' existences aren't dependent on whether or not they're even higher. Like, the penguin being higher does not make it more likely to exist. But here, these maximal properties do make it more likely to exist.
That would be an argument for necessity. You're just saying that it increases their maximality, but what you're actually describing, it sounds like, is that these qualities are necessary for the one to exist, for anyone to exist.
That I'm saying it's necessary for maximal intelligence? No, it's just that we could call it a war of possibility, of potentials, to see which potential exists. And that's what we could do, is we could use potential instead of possible, I guess. I mean, it's not the same, but anyway, that's what I'm doing now.
But I mean, you just can't use the same argument for anything else. A maximally large whale, well, it's just as large as the largest whale, and we can say that we can just
make a whale more likely to exist. That's the whole thing. Like, the likelihood is increased the more these maximal qualities go, but that's not true with the height of a penguin or with the size of a whale.
I don't think you can say that the likelihood increases just because it's more maximally anything.
Well, that's the argument that I made down to one is victorious. It sounded like you were pretty okay with.
Well, because you said that the likelihood of existence of maximal purpose is maximally likely. And the way that that's phrased is true. Because whatever the maximal is 100% likely. The likelihood is 1, just because it is what exists. But there's no way to apply that to a hypothetical maximal. You have to know what the actual one is in order to state that. So
Okay, I see
the
what you
likelihood
mean.
of the actual existence is 1, but we have no idea which is the actual maximal. We have a bunch of hypotheticals, but I don't.
Yeah, I think the issue is that we're actually discussing that thing that is the basis of everything. And so it is its own basis. So then this argument is special in that way, that this argument is all about something that's its own basis, whereas no other argument will ever be about something that's its own basis. You know, everything else is based in this one thing. And so that really makes it a very unique topic to discuss. So you end up with what could be called special pleading, but it's rightful special pleading. Like I can't, if it was increasing its size, I couldn't say, look, by finding a way that it's increased, then yeah, that hypothetical one is bigger, right? If I make the hypothetical whale bigger, it's a bigger hypothetical whale. If I make the hypothetical penguin higher, it's a higher hypothetical penguin.
But that doesn't
here,
make it more likely, though, right?
yeah, but here I am saying that if I make this hypothetical realm, this hypothetical source of the universe, or this hypothetical universe, if I make it more likely, then it's more likely. Is, you know, so like the penguin being higher would be higher. The hypothetical penguin, if it's higher, is higher. The hypothetical whale, if it's bigger, it's bigger. The hypothetical possibility, if it's more likely, is more likely. So I think that's where we're at.
But what makes it more likely?
Well, there's the first 10 points.
Is it
And
like
I make it even stronger here on point 11.
I don't see how you get to more likely though, just because it's more maximal. Because that's like you just.
Well, it's maximal specifically in harmony and purpose. It's not just some vague maximal, like using the concept of quantity or math or something. It's not exactly the same thing as that. It's kind of trying to stick to, you know, the coexistive properties, and, you know, purpose being that those coexistive properties increase with time. So you have this, you know, that way it's ballooning and getting bigger. So that gives you that more potential maximum, you know?
You have a larger potential maximal, but does it actually exist?
Well,
And
because
just because it has more of an intense quality doesn't mean that it necessarily exists.
Okay, so if it has the more maximal harmony makes it more likely to exist, and the more maximal purpose makes it more likely to exist.
But
so
how?
in those senses, it's the more likely, the hypothetical that's more likely is more likely. Well, isn't that what the first 10 points were that we agreed on? So are we now looking back in the proof somewhere to disagree?
No, I don't think that's what you were saying at all.
Let me see.
Or
that's exactly what I think I'm talking about. I thought I was pretty detailed about it.
okay, so point 8, premise B, maybe. I think you said the greater the maximal purpose, the greater the maximal power to exist, the more likely the existence. Okay, yeah, I think I would have to disagree with that. I don't disagree with point C.
So on 9 here,
Yeah,
what are on screen now?
premise B.
The greater the maximal purpose, the greater the maximal power to exist, the more likely the existence thereof. Okay, if this was a chronological entity, that would make no sense, but this is a trans-temporal entity. So a more likely entity is more likely. A taller entity is taller. So we're talking about a more likely hypothetical. So can you tell me where the more likely breaks down for you? Is it just at intelligence? Is it at harmony or purpose? I think a moment ago we were here at step 8 or step 9.
Well, whatever it is, whatever the maximal is what is likely. But we don't know
Yeah, 'cause
what
we-
qualities that it has or how maximal its qualities are. You seem to be saying that the more maximal its hypothetical qualities, the more maximal its likelihood.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. You see, because all we have to work with is hypothetical, because this is something that we don't have empirical proof on. And so if we're in the hypothetical, then our best argument is for the most likely hypothetical. So if I can make my hypothetical maximally likely, then I think it's fair that I've won the argument.
But how are you making it maximally likely?
Well, I tried to make that case. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you think I failed, I think it's pretty solid. I mean, you haven't shown me anywhere that I think it's weak.
Yeah, I think because you say whatever. Do you say it's more likely in point 11? The
Point
maximally
11?
likely source of the universe is that entity with maximal harmony and maximal purpose. But then you say that this purpose has to include intelligence.
Well,
For
that just
starters.
brings the argument, because anyone reading this will be like, "Oh yeah, I would have those qualities more if it had more intelligence." And if they don't think that, then I mean, what can I do, right? Because I can't fix stupid. But this this maximally intelligent statement is very good. And if someone's being smart and honest and reasonable and has some good philosophy and stuff, they're going to agree with me on it.
No,
So
no.
honestly, where I stand, unless you can convince me otherwise, or you haven't really given me any reason why it's weak. You're just trying to keep questioning it. And
Yeah,
I
because
see
you
a
can't do this for anything else. You're
strong.
making an exception for this one God. So
Well, I already explained
The
that.
the whatever the maximal harmony and maximal purpose is just what it is, and it doesn't. It could be lower than in having intelligence. So
Yeah, but that's not-
you're still mixing the hypothetical with the actual in point A.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's just that, like, that's fine. It's just that it's not as strong an argument as mine. So you can say that this isn't a 100% foolproof, but as far as I can tell, it's the best. And so, yeah, I mean, at this point, I'd be like, okay, let me hear a better proposition and we'll see which one wins or whatever, but I'm still happy with this one.
It doesn't prove anything though.
Okay, well, I mean, I think it has proven itself to be the best argument. And so, I mean, if better than any other possibility isn't good enough for you, that's fine with me.
But you said it's a bad argument applied to anything else.
Well, I mean, to say that a hypothetical tree being taller makes it more likely is not true, but to say a hypothetical entity being more likely makes it more likely is true. And so I'm not going to
That's just a tautology.
What?
That's just a tautology. If it's more likely, then it's more likely. Yes.
Yeah, but you're just making a false equivocation. So I shouldn't have to use tautology. You should just see it for what it is.
It's not, because you're arguing that the more maximal, it is more maximal if it has maximal intelligence, etc., etc. So this one has more maximal harmony and power to exist, and more maximal likelihood if it has these qualities, maximal intelligence, etc.
Down to like discuss these. Like, why do you think maximal intelligence wouldn't do that? I mean, because I put it there to make the argument stronger. I'm trying to make the strongest argument I can. If I take it out, the argument becomes weaker. So
No,
if you
it
think,
doesn't.
okay, so and you think that's because, well, okay, so would you explain that to me? Because I think that's not reasonable.
Because if you say that a more maximally intelligent hamster would have more harmony and more purpose, therefore a hamster as smart as a human exists, because it would be more maximally great.
Well, I didn't use the standard argument that other people used. I used my own words. I never used the word great once in this.
Sure, it would have more maximal harmony and purpose.
Or maybe I do mention greatness earlier. No, I don't think I do in this one. I don't think I use vastness in this one. But yeah, my point is that like we're still talking about increasing the likelihood. But now let me explain why I think intelligence makes it stronger. I know I said I'd do that earlier and I failed, but I think I kind of have it now. Intelligence describes a process of being able to take information and put a purpose to it. And so the definition of intelligence does mean that maximal intelligence increases the maximal purpose. And so I'm totally fine with having it there.
Well, having an intelligence equal to a human's increases the maximal purpose of a hamster. Therefore, a hamster with a human intelligence exists.
Well, it would have greater purpose, but it would not have greater likelihood.
Exactly. So likelihood is not connected to how maximal its qualities are.
I mean, the thing is that a hamster cannot. Well, I mean, The maximal purpose of the most maximal if they are maximally intelligent. So I think you're breaking through to me. I mean, I'm sure I'm still going to disagree with you afterwards, but if you can sort of try to hammer into me again.
Yeah, I mean, if we have the 1 and we just make that an x, we can put anything there, and the argument should be able to hold. So if
so we're talking about, sorry, I was just asking you to help me, so that's why I'm interrupting, because we're talking about this hamster having like, if it has more purpose, according to my argument, it's more likely to exist because more purpose is more likelihood to exist. But that's only in the case of this entity. That's just taking it out of context. I spent 10 previous points setting the context for why point 11 can be talked about this way. And so, well, yeah, that's my response.
So what's so special about this entity that allows it to kind of break that argument?
It's very special to be the 1, which, like I said earlier, we should maybe be able to use the word 1 to communicate, so I just did.
So if we added the premise, it's very special, would that change the argument about the hamster?
You asked me what's so special about this, and I cited the entire argument coming to this 1. That word 1 indicates something special, especially in context of this argument. So, I mean, hopefully you get what I'm jiving at there. You said, what's so special about this entity that it's worthy of the special pleading? And that's where this 1 comes in, and the entire argument leading up to it. The context of a hamster existing is totally different than the context of the universe existing. So you're really using a lot of false equivocation. I don't know if you can stop using false equivocation and just get direct to it. Why you dislike the argument?
Well, it's not a false equivocation in any way, shape, or form. You just say that it's has these special qualities, but I'm not seeing
how would a hamster fit into my first 10 steps of the proof and then be the 1 that's in context of the 11?
It doesn't have to. You're saying that.
Well, except that this is the 11th step of an 11-step proof. It's not just the first step.
Yeah, you're saying that something that has a more maximal purpose is more likely if it has more maximal purpose. It doesn't matter what it is.
Well, no, it's in this context. So, I mean, I guess
so
I should
only
have said right away, but I've never done this before, But now that you and I are really butting heads on this, I'm like, the context doesn't really allow for any of these trees or whales or penguins or hamsters, but it does allow for a universe, So, I mean...
Well, you say that, but I don't... Like, where... Maybe you want to amend it, but where does that... Where can we say that the 1 is more likely to exist because it has more maximal purpose?
Okay,
as opposed to all other things where that argument fails. Do you agree that this premise B here does not work for anything else?
greater than maximum.
It doesn't work for hamsters, it doesn't work for trees, it doesn't work for penguins or islands.
Okay, it actually does. It's just that all true purpose is in God. And so God decides those purposes. So you can't just hypothetically a different one because God already did.
So if if I propose a hamster with more maximal purpose, that hamster is more likely to exist?
Yes, but in this context, its purpose would be held in God. So those hamsters do exist. But
What?
So just something about where, because entity is the source of its own existence. Because it's the source of its own existence, as we change the hypothetical, we're changing that relationship, and we can improve our hypothetical to one that's more likely to really exist.
So if we have one hypothetical, both of them are the source of their own existence, but one has an intelligence and the other does not have an intelligence. How does having intelligence make one more likely than the other?
Because the one that has intelligence can have more purpose and more harmony, and harmony is coexistive power. And if it has more coexistive power than the other one, more power to exist, then it's the more likely of the two.
But why?
Why is more? Well, because it is coexistiveness. So existence is, existence is being. So more existenceness is more being. And the only reason we don't have everything existing is, that there's
Well, it's
the
like
reason we don't have everything existing is because there is mind in it. But there's mind, it's likely that there's mind in it. I mean, that makes sense because it increases these likely elements. So I guess I'm getting a little bit circular here. Maybe we should focus on this point for a minute and see if I can iron it out or if you got me.
how do we know that it's anything other than an assertion to say that more harmony is more likely?
How do we know it's anything other than an assertion? More harmony is more likely. And we're based on the same definitions I'm using here.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, at some point, everything has to come down to one's own experience and intuition. And so, I think I've done pretty solid here. So yeah, I mean, my intuition finds it very hard to have the same problems you have. Like, these things are, I mean, maybe I would like to say that it's by definition in the argument. So then again, maybe you don't like the definition of harmony. So I'm just all over the place here on the screen. Sorry, guys. Measure of harmony. Let's describe. So what question are we on again? What are you asking me?
Well, I think that you might be doing this, whereas you're saying harmony is the power to exist, but you're also saying likelihood is the power to exist. And you're kind of bridging them that way.
No, I'm saying what has more power to exist is more likely to exist. So it sounds like maybe I've not done a good enough job of articulating that or proving that. And I mean, maybe that's just another one of those presuppositions where I'm like, well, if someone is hearing this argument and they hear me say that more power to exist makes something more likely to exist, then for them, they should be like, well, that's a good way of looking at it. So that means that I find this argument stronger. So it might just be as simple as that. Like, it might just be that because it's a good presupposition, it strengthens the argument, and that maybe another presupposition that that a hypothetical with more power to exist is more likely to exist. So that might be a presupposition here. Is that a problem?
Yeah, if you're defining power to exist as a state of harmony, because then you're using two different definitions and equating them through the same phrase. Like, I'm still trying to understand what you're saying with what an increased or a greater measure of harmony is, but where I object to is when you say that the measurement of power to exist correlates with likelihood to exist. So that's like the main problem still.
Okay. So I was back here where I changed things. So the measure of harmony is described as measure of power to exist, and so correlates with likelihood to exist. Yeah, and with this one, I'm just going to be like, if you think this makes the argument weak, then go ahead and think my argument is weak, because I think reason would consider this to be strong. And I can only really address reason. I can't really address that which doesn't have very good intuition for reason. You know what I mean? I want to be very clear that, like, I think this is on an intuitive level. But yeah, I'm really looking to appeal to intuitions of reason, not to intuitions of objecting to reason.
Well, I don't. The point of a syllogism isn't to have intuitive conclusions. It's a logical format. But if it's reasonable, you can give a reason why those two are connected in a syllogistic form. So I still don't see how you can say that it correlates to likelihood.
Well, these are such abstract things that we don't observe, so I don't understand how I'm just not aware of how I could make some kind of syllogistic point to strengthen that. Power to exist correlates with likelihood to exist. I mean, when I think about that, and I think how would I prove that, I get images of like physical things in my head, like physical science, and there's no physical science I can do to back this up. So I think we just have to let whoever is reading it or whatever judge for themselves on this point, because it seems like it would need a scientific backup, and that's not possible.
So it's not possible to back up that point?
Well, not with science, and
well, then there's no reason to believe it.
But I'm not sure that if you need it to be stronger here, I don't think I'm ready to make it stronger here.
You guys had a great chat the other day, by the way, Nicholas and Snake. I enjoyed that part. I think I watched most of it.
Well, Smokey, what do you think? Because you said the first time we chatted, you said that you kind of agreed with my point about how we don't know whether that maximal that is the hypothetical is the actual maximal, and I was trying to get Nicholas to kind of connect the dots.
And I guess that's kind of what I was drawing from, of looking at it from, like, I think what I was kind of almost saying or trying to draw at is that was one, to me, a weaker component of it, because there was like a unsubstantiated presupposition in it, like that there needed to be something to almost sure up the base of that standard, that the likelihood of this being existing is high. I feel like there was some sort of potential, like there needed some sort of evidence base or logic base to kind of more support it, because it felt like it was kind of just sitting out there on its own type thing. Do you get what I'm saying?